Well, we, I believe,
So
are
it
live
the whole
right
time.
now. Blair, give me the thumbs up when the feed starts. Cool. All right, let's just give a couple moments, let the room fill up a little bit. For those who have been patiently waiting, thanks. We're very excited to have you all here today. Just let me know when to go. That's pretty cool. Wow. All right, just give it a few more seconds and we'll go ahead and kick off the show. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a very special episode of Office Hours. Today we're going to be talking about WebAuthn, how it works, what it is, security benefits, and you'll even get to see a live demo. So pretty cool stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in our YouTube chat channel. I'll be monitoring it as we go. And once the demo's over, we'll go ahead and start answering some of those questions. Today, I'm joined with Mr. Matt Hathcock, really good friend and awesome sales engineer over at FusionAuth, and we have a super special guest, Mr. Spencer Witt. Spencer has been working very hard on this new WebAuthn feature that we just rolled out. Spencer, thank you for joining us today, and go ahead, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself and your role at FusionAuth.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. My name's Spencer. I've been a developer at FusionAuth for about 6 months now. And for most of that time, I've been working on FusionAuth's WebAuthn implementation.
Sweet. So WebAuthn, it's a pretty hot buzzword, hearing more and more these days, especially since we've been working on it so hard lately. Can you kind of tell everyone that's not familiar with it what it is exactly?
Sure. WebAuthn is a W3C specification that enables users to securely authenticate to websites in their browser without using a password. Instead of that, they use a device called an authenticator. These are typically standalone hardware devices like a YubiKey or a dedicated secure hardware element that's part of a larger system like a laptop or phone. Authenticators that are integrated with the device, like a that are integrated with the device can be used to authenticate a user with the same mechanism they use to unlock their device. So if you have a phone that has a fingerprint scanner or you use a PIN or a pattern to unlock, those same methods can be used to authenticate you to websites. And these websites communicate with the available authenticators using JavaScript APIs in the browser. And part of the reason for the recent buzz around WebAuthn is that there have been commitments by big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, and Apple to adopting and furthering the WebAuthn standard.
So standards, they all pretty much use the same standard, have their own flavor of how they use it. These standards are working off of key pairs, right? Can you kind of dive into how that's working?
Yeah, so a WebAuthn credential, or passkey as they call it, consists of both a public and a private key. The private key is stored on that authenticator device, and the public key is sent to the server, which is called the relying party in the WebAuthn spec. After that credential or passkey has been registered, upon request and after the user agrees to it, the authenticator can use one of its stored passkeys, the private key, to sign a challenge presented by the server. The server validates the response from the authenticator and then can use that as proof of a user's identity to authenticate them without using a password.
So it sounds like you're kind of knocking out two-factor in one swoop. You have something you own, something you are. Sounds like there's some pretty awesome security benefits to all of this. Can you kind of expand on that some more?
Yeah, aside from enabling really smooth workflows for authentication, there are some really important security benefits that WebAuthn offers. The first is that there's nothing to steal. So if you think about the traditional password, if a password is improperly hashed or stored in the database, those are vulnerable to hackers. They could gain access to that data and potentially use it to gain unauthorized access to an account. But in the case of WebAuthn, the private key never leaves the device where it was generated, and there's nothing to steal from the database. If a hacker were to get access to the public key, they couldn't use that to authenticate with the user's account. WebAuthn also offers some phishing resistance through its integration with the browser. It can only be used in secure contexts with a valid TLS connection, and credentials are tied to the domain where they're registered, which makes it phishing resistant. If you were to get an email that had a phishing link in it that looks like a website you frequent, but the URL is just a little bit off, if you're using a username and password, someone may be tricked into entering their credentials, which are then given over to the hacker by the fake site. With WebAuthn, it wouldn't even present the credential as an option to authenticate on the phishing site. And then compared to other two-factor methods like SMS or email verification, those can easily be intercepted or spoofed. Authenticator apps may spam a user with notifications until they approve just to stop getting those notifications. And those are actually behind some recent high-profile hacks where an engineer was spammed with these two-factor notifications until they eventually relented and just agreed to it so they'd stop being bombarded. Another security benefit of WebAuthn that ties into all this is that it requires physical proximity to that authenticator device in order to complete the workflow. So it's difficult or impossible to complete a WebAuthn ceremony remotely.
Wow. So let's get a little technical on this. Can you kind of explain how this passwordless authentication is working?
Sure. So there are two main workflows in WebAuthn, registration and authentication. These are called ceremonies by the spec because they involve both the communication protocol between the server, browser, and authenticator device, and also requires physical interaction by a human to authorize the action. Both ceremonies in WebAuthn have the same basic workflow. First, a user requests to start the WebAuthn ceremony, either registration or authentication. The server generates a unique challenge that can be used to prevent certain types of replay attacks. And it sends this challenge along with options for the ceremony to the authenticator device using a JavaScript API on the browser. From there, the authenticator takes over. There's a test of user presence and optional user verification through something like a fingerprint or a PIN to consent to the WebAuthn action. And then the authenticator performs its thing, either creating a new passkey in the case of registration or generating a signature with an existing passkey with authentication. The server validates the response from the authenticator, and then it either completes or fails the workflow accordingly.
Awesome. So I know everyone has their own preference for like browsers and operating systems. We have people that prefer PC over Mac, Brave over Chrome. Do these workflow ceremonies work with all browsers and operating systems, or are there some that aren't available?
Yeah, it has pretty widespread support. All major browsers, except for Internet Explorer and Opera Mini, support WebAuthn, and Firefox only offers partial support at this time. And as far as operating systems, it's supported across most major operating systems: Mac OS, Windows, Chrome OS, Android, and iOS.
Cool. And so how does FusionAuth handle the ceremonies?
So FusionAuth is using WebAuthn in a few different ways. The one that we chose to focus on first is reauthentication. So reauthentication is used to streamline the authentication process with a website after a user has authenticated before. So in the case of FusionAuth, after a user authenticates with their username and password, we're detecting that they're on a system that supports WebAuthn and that they have an authenticator available that's a good fit for the reauthentication workflow. And in this case, we're looking for an authenticator that's integrated with their device, what's called a platform authenticator. This way we know that they'll have that available in the future when they want to authenticate on that device again. So if we detect that, we'll prompt them to register a credential and tell them in the future they'll be able to use that they'll be able to log in without using a password. If they agree to that, we'll register a new credential. And then the next time they visit the login page, instead of being presented with the username and password fields that they would normally see, we're going to show them the list of credentials that they have available for authentication. And they have the option to select one of those and use that for authenticating. And we're going to show off a demo here of the reauthentication workflow in a little bit. The second workflow that FusionAuth is working on with WebAuthn is bootstrap authentication. So reauthentication is signing in multiple times on the same device without a password. Bootstrap authentication allows you to sign in on a new device for the first time without using a password. And reauthentication is best suited for a platform authenticator that's integrated with the device. Bootstrap authentication needs a cross-platform or roaming authenticator that can be used between devices so that you can register a credential on one device and then take that authenticator to a different device and sign in there. And the third workflow that we're going to be working on is two-factor authentication with WebAuthn. As I mentioned earlier, there are some important security benefits with WebAuthn, and one of those is the phishing resistance that it offers through integration with the browser. And we think that this will be a good fit for enterprises that want to prevent employee accounts from being taken over, and that WebAuthn can help secure those accounts better than other two-factor methods.
Sweet, man. Sounds awesome. All right, so are you ready? Can we see it in action? See what
Sure.
all your hard work has done?
Yeah. Let me share my screen here, and then if you could just let me know when you're ready to go.
We're ready.
Okay, so here I am on FusionAuth's demo site that we set up with this early access build of FusionAuth that has WebAuthn enabled. And here I am on the normal login page. So I'm going to enter my username and password and submit that form. And so at this point, FusionAuth has detected that I'm on a device that supports WebAuthn and that I've got a platform authenticator available that supports user verification, which is exactly what we're looking for the re-authentication workflow. So I'm redirected and offered the option to register a credential that I can use in the future to no longer have to authenticate using password on this device. So I'm gonna enter a name for this new credential, click register, and now I'm presented, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm on a MacBook that supports Touch ID. So now I'm being prompted to verify my identity on this site using the Touch ID that's integrated with the Mac. So I'll go ahead and scan my fingerprint here on the laptop. And now I've been redirected to the FusionAuth admin UI after I've completed registering that credential. So I'll go ahead and log out now. And normally at this point, I would be redirected back to the login page with the username and password fields. But because FusionAuth has detected that I've got that re-authentication credential available, instead I'm offered the option to sign in without a password using WebAuthn. So I recognize this credential as the one that I just registered. I'm going to click that. And I'm again prompted to verify my identity with the fingerprint. So I will go ahead and scan my fingerprint here. And now I'm logged back into FusionAuth with that re-authentication workflow without having to use my password. So that's all there is to it. It's almost anticlimactic because it's just so smooth, but we think it's going to be really great, a great authentication experience for users and make their logins more secure.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's definitely quick and easy, it seems like.
Yeah.
So this has been your world for a while now, writing all this stuff. Where do you see passwordless going in the future? Do you think we'll be living in a passwordless world one day? Do you think more people are going to be adopting WebAuthn?
I really hope so. I look forward to the passwordless future, and it's been a long time coming. There's still some work to do to get all the way there. Truly passwordless accounts where you can register for an account without a password are going to require some more work in the area of account recovery, especially. So if you think about registering for an account where your only means of login is using WebAuthn and you lose or replace your device, there's no way to get back into your account. You can't say, send me a new password, I forgot.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Google and Apple especially have been doing some work here recently on creating WebAuthn passkeys that can be synced between devices via their backend services. So for example, in the case of Apple, they're using their iCloud keychain to sync these WebAuthn passkeys between a user's devices. Or if they were to say replace their phone and they sign into iCloud on the new device, they would then have that same passkey available there for authentication.
That's awesome. Thank you for all of that awesome demo and explaining all that stuff for us. I guess this question's for you, Matt. When is this going to be available for everyone, and who gets it?
Yeah, so we've Spencer's been working hard, and it should be available in the next release, which is slotted for this month, November. So we're pretty excited for that, and then that will be for sure to enterprise and essentials customers. And then there'll be some nuances as far as some of the other use cases that he was speaking of, like YubiKeys kind of makes more sense in the enterprise scenario, so it'll probably be restricted to that and just some of those other roaming authenticator options. But yeah, we're pretty excited, and definitely anyone interested in using it should reach out to us.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. Well, again, guys, feel free to start asking some questions in chat. Nothing's been submitted yet, but we'll go ahead and open it up to a Q&A now that we've kind of dove in for a bit. But we have a couple questions ready to go for you, Spence. Can WebAuthn be used for 2FA, like my phone, able to satisfy a two-factor challenge?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, two-factor authentication is one of the use cases that we're looking at in FusionAuth. And there are some other options for two-factor available, but WebAuthn is more secure than those other options. And I think it also provides a more streamlined user experience. So much more secure than SMS or email verification codes, easier to use than the authenticator apps that generate that one-time code that you have to go copy or type in. So I think it's going to be a really good use case, especially for those enterprise customers that want to secure their employee accounts.
So is that if I'm at a desktop that's not WebAuthn enabled and I go to sign in, I might receive a notification to my phone to then do a Face ID or a thumbprint to be authenticated?
Yeah, so there are a few options. One option would be having a dedicated hardware device like a YubiKey that you can plug into your machine, and you just touch a little capacitive area on that to indicate that you're there. They do also support, WebAuthn supports Bluetooth connected phones, so you can connect your phone to your computer with Bluetooth, and then you use the authenticator on your phone to complete the WebAuthn ceremony on your desktop computer.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that kind of solves that proximity requirement you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
So, sorry, I guess my chat's not working, but we do have some questions. Mr. Daniel DeGraff, is a passkey the same as WebAuthn?
A passkey is an individual WebAuthn credential. The specification referred to them as credentials, and recently they started pushing the term passkey to refer to those credentials. So WebAuthn is the specification that you're using to authenticate with these passkeys.
Okay, nice.
How does this differ, like the spec for WebAuthn? And I mean, I've been using, Face ID, and before that came out, they had them on the iPhone to get into apps that I have on my phone. But all that seems kind of contained to the platform. How do those differentiate?
Yeah, so the user experience between those two cases is going to be very similar. You'll go to authenticate and then be presented with a prompt to either scan your fingerprint or your face to complete it. The big difference here is that in those cases, like if you have a banking app on your phone and you have it set up to authenticate with your fingerprint in the future, that's all inside that native application. So it's using the same type of access to your device unlock functionality to authenticate you. The difference here is that with WebAuthn, you can do that in the browser, and then you can use that fingerprint authentication all across the internet rather than just in those dedicated native applications.
Nice.
We got another question from Shadow. How is recovery done if the authenticator item is lost?
Yeah, so that's a big question right now. For FusionAuth specifically, at this point, we don't yet have it enabled where you can register for an account with WebAuthn. So you have to create your account with the password or whatever other method the admin has chosen. So at this time, FusionAuth always has that to fall back on. But in the future, having these devices where those passkeys can be synced across your devices within that ecosystem, that will allow for one form of account recovery. I mentioned that like the iCloud keychain is being used to sync your passkeys across your Apple devices, which works, if you register on your iPhone and want to use it on a MacBook, but it also works in the case where you replace your phone or something like that. For those dedicated hardware devices like a YubiKey, they actually recommend, I've seen recommended that you have 2 YubiKeys, which is maybe a hard sell for some people, but the idea is that you would register a credential on each of them, and then one of them you carry around with you to authenticate, and the other is kept in a safe place for account recovery.
Nice. All right. Josh has a good one. What is a replay attack, and how can I protect myself with WebAuthn?
Yeah, so the replay attack, that would be like, so the way that WebAuthn prevents replay attacks is by requiring a challenge that's generated by the server. And this is unique to each of the WebAuthn workflows. So every time you try to authenticate, it's going to be a new challenge. A replay attack would be the case where like a hacker intercepts the response from the authenticator for a particular login attempt, and then they would be able to just send, without that unique challenge that changes things up every time, they would just be able to keep sending that same request over and over again, and use that to authenticate.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Dan, how is WebAuthn helpful for the consumer market as opposed to the employee workforce market?
Yeah, I think that the big thing for consumers is just going to be the ease of use. So you don't need to have all of these passwords that you use for each site, or a password manager that's being filled with hundreds of passwords for all the sites that you visit. So you don't have to worry about the password management piece of it. It also provides a streamlined workflow that makes it really easy when you're coming back to a site to just scan your fingerprint and log in rather than entering that password. And I think that the security benefits are really important too. And maybe most consumers aren't as concerned about security, but they get all those benefits even if they don't, even if that's not a major selling point for them, it makes their accounts more secure.
That's great. Awesome. So, that's all the questions we have submitted right now. If anyone's watching this after it's been uploaded and you have any questions that we didn't cover, you can feel free to submit them on our forum. It's FusionAuth.io/community and /forums. And, thank you, Spencer, so much for everything you've been doing. This is awesome stuff. You're the man. Matt, thank you for hanging out again with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone watching in and for the awesome community we have. It's growing fast. We have some exciting stuff coming up in the future. We'll be doing another office hours in a couple weeks covering AWS reInvent. We'll be there at the end of the month for the whole show. So our next episode will be covering what we'll be doing and some fun activities we got going on. And thank you everyone involved in all of this, engineering team. This is some really exciting, cool stuff. And biometrics, it's pretty sweet. Spencer, thank you a million times. You're the best. And
thank you again for having me.
Yeah. Hope everyone has an awesome Friday and great weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.